Like any introductory title, the first Fallout game kickstarted the entire franchise and defined what the franchise would be aesthetically, bringing in many mainstay elements, whether intentional or not, such as vaults, energy weapons, super mutants, the ghouls, deathclaws, and power armor. And some would argue their peak utilization was this very title. Let's discuss Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game. I don't plan to spend a whole lot of time over these history segments because, let's be honest, it's a fairly well-known story. Still, Fallout began development as a spiritual successor to the Wasteland series, which would eventually get its own proper sequel in the future, a series I would like to cover as well. Initially, it was meant to use the generic universal role-playing system developed by Steve Jackson Games, but plans fell through and the special system we know today was created to replace it. Moving from GURPS to special was a pretty massive change that caused quite a lot of differences to the final product. Removals, merges, simplifications. While I can't say for sure if it's for better or the worse, the change to special did do a lot to help shape Fallout's own identity. The special system is, well, special. It feels unique, despite it just being another attribute system, and is unmistakably Fallout. In the end, Fallout was released September 30th, 1997. Fallout 1 is a CRPG, computer role-playing game, or classic role-playing game, depending on who you ask. What that basically means is it tries to emulate the pen and paper experience, through maps with grids, turn-based, isometric, with complex mechanics topped with dice rolling and multipliers. For some people, especially people brought into the fold by Fallout 3, these mechanics are a definite turnoff. I know back in the day, it was for me when I first gave it a try. The slow combat can be rather unforgiving. A low-skilled character will miss many of their attacks despite being one hex away. This is pretty easy to resolve in a level or two, but still, it makes the beginning a slog. Enemies do not scale with your level, meaning you could very well tangle with something that far outclasses you, if you decide to leave the attendant early game path. Personally, I like that, but many others may dislike the inconvenience. And speaking of early game path, there's no go here marker that the newer games have, so it's incredibly easy to get lost if you don't know what you're doing. And there's a lot of ways you can screw up so bad that you're almost in an unwinnable situation. Not only in poor combat situations, but even builds. A character with too low of intelligence will not be able to take some quests.
Get your butt in here and sit down. We got some business to discuss. Get out of here, you idiot!
But that could be what exactly makes it fun. You can put yourself in these terrible situations due to the fact that these games refuse to hold your hand. Essentially, you're tossed out into a cave full of rats, given some starter gear, and told to swim or drown. After that, you can pretty much do what you like. There is the find a water chip timer, but what you do in that a lot of time is up to you. Of course, the newer games are open world, and that gives you a good amount of freedom, so that's not exactly an alien concept to new players. Though I'd argue there's certainly more freedom in the classic titles. After all, there's almost no such thing as an instinctual NPC. Except one. Kinda. One that's immortal until a certain moment, but spoiler for those who are not already in the know. But even still, with all the freedom, it doesn't mean much if you don't really know how to play. And for better or worse, Fallout comes from a time where it's fairly common to shove a rather thick manual into your game's case rather than teach you how to play in-game. And thick Fallout's manual was, sitting over at 120 pages. That's not a total bad thing, some of it has some rather interesting tidbits of lore, but it's not a typical standard for teaching in modern game settings. Even still, reading this manual isn't a necessity. You get pretty used to the controls rather quickly, but I do feel like this is the biggest hurdle for most players, learning how to navigate and interact with the world effectively. It's not a really hard game, but there's a bit of a learning curve. But heck, one dude made it all the way through Fallout 1 without actually knowing he could reload without having to go into his inventory.
Bloody fine job making it through the defenses, mate. I'm rather impressed.
Though I do feel like there's some people who still want to enjoy the general gameplay even if they know how to play. After all, Fallout has evolved into the first-person role-playing game. And for many people, that is the style that they prefer, and it's a valid opinion to have. Personally, I've come to quite enjoy the old-school gameplay style. It works well. I do find it disappointing that some skills and attributes are next to useless, like Charisma in Fallout 1, or the Trap skill. But overall, it's a good time. It's calm yet unforgiving, violent yet approachable. Fallout's gameplay demands that you adapt to this world, while giving you options how you want to do so. It does not think you're the champion. It doesn't care about you. You are the protagonist, but Fallout's world is the star. You're there to explore it and hope to survive, which is fairly easy to do once you get the hang of it, but it's still pretty difficult for a rookie. Speaking of the Fallout world, let's talk about it and the aesthetics it presents. The Fallout world is a desolate world, is tired, hungry, and suffering. I find it doesn't really need to present this desolation by throwing skeletons all around the map, but rather a strong focus on the ambient music, whispering voices, the sound of disembodied machinery, wind that's not there, and sirens blasting off from ancient time. Even town songs like Life of a Trader doesn't sound entirely friendly or warm, but it's definitely more bouncy and lively. A stark contrast to the likes of Necropolis' City of the Dead. They're very well done tracks that bring something special into the Fallout environment. Maps themselves and artistic directions also help. Vibrant colors and 1950s pop art. Deep blue vault suits and a harsh contrast with the gooey green sludges of the boneyard. We are constantly greeted by those large heads sticking out of the wall, which has remained in the series to this day. This has an uneasy presence of an unknown god lording over you. Art and music aside, you really can't talk about Fallout without talking about the NPCs and factions. Like any game, some are more memorable than others. Unsurprisingly, some of those memorable ones are actually voiced, and rather magnificently, utilizing powerhouses like Cree Summers, Tony Jay, and Jim Cummins.
Alright, here's the deal. Junktown, it ain't what it used to be. The only reason it's still here is because of my gambling establishment. Even so, Killian's been breathing down my neck, and I'm starting to take it personal. And that's where you come in, Slick.
But I find that towns really stand out. Shady Sands, Junktown, and the Hub, in particular, have wormed their way into my heart. Especially Shady Sands for its rather future influential status. The world of Fallout 1, through its various flavors of towns, quests, NPCs, oddly feels pretty cohesive. I can buy Junktown existing just as well as the Hub, which is a pretty difficult feat given how very different styles they have. Fallout Story is perhaps the one thing I see most commended. If I find a post where someone says they hated the gameplay, they often will add something like, "but I like the story," or "I like the lore." And that's for a good reason. On one hand, the story starts off like any other, a big guffin thrown out there to make you explore the wasteland, then evolves into a bigger story. The first game's plot is about learning the origins of the super mutants. The unity is the goal of the super mutant. Under the influential ideology of the Master, they partner with the religious zeal of human supporters who aim to unite the wasteland under a single race, the super mutant.
The super mutant is the next advancement in human evolution. To save the world, we will convert all the worthy individuals. Simple, efficient, glorious.
And they will stop at nothing to achieve their goal. What really sells it, though, is the Master himself. He truly believed in his goal, and honestly, he has a point. If not for the mutant sterility, his way could arguably be right. After all the horror you witness, after all the death you've seen it cause, and after walking for days through a Californian desert and seeing the depravity of man at this height, you could honestly buy how a species dedicated to surviving the wasteland being the new heirs of the world isn't such a bad idea. However, at the end of it, because the super mutants are sterile, if you choose to convince him, the Master admits to the errors of his ways and makes the ultimate sacrifice. It's honestly my absolute favorite story in the franchise. It's been well over 23 years since Fallout was first released, and we're getting close to 24 come the 30th of September. As new owners came, new games released, technology improved, and a genre shift happened. Fallout has changed. It's harder for new players used to the convenience of modern games to really pick it up and play it all the way through. Most do, in fact, rage quit or get bored of the style. But those who do stick around often find themselves really enjoying it. And I get it, I was one of those people. But Fallout, not just the franchise, but the original Fallout became one of my absolute favorite titles ever. I'm not sure where I rank it, definitely somewhere in the top 20 for sure. Should you pick it up? Here's my recommendation. It's worth a try. It really is. If you have a PC, you can often get it pretty cheap. Not on sale, it's about $10. On sale, it could drop down to $2.50. But if you still aren't entirely sure, you could check out my little test. The Aloof. It's not meant to be taken absolutely seriously, but I do feel those who rank higher on a test would probably actually enjoy it. Though there's always special circumstances. And if you decide you want to head first into Fallout 1, I also have a video for a bit of a quick start guide to get you familiar with the mechanics.
You saved us, but you'll kill us. I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.